Hello everybody, welcome to the show, and I want to address something really quickly before we get to the actual show. So this is actually a re-record after the original video was filmed. It included face cam and everything, and I wasn't able to actually get access to it. I couldn't get it off my phone no matter what I did, and so this is a re-record, and I'm working on this about a day before this video is supposed to be uploaded because I was trying different methods to try to access the footage and I wasn't able to get it. So please bear with me, and thank you guys for tuning in. With that being said, let's actually address a few housekeeping notes before we get into the video itself. I am aware that there were audio issues with last week's video, and I couldn't anticipate that would be the case during the editing of that video. I also received some feedback, which I am grateful for. I was extremely tense while making the last video, and I learned that it's one thing to make the best product possible, but it's another thing to hide my personality. From now on, I'll be trying to let go and be myself so that you all get to know me. I know that my personality is one of the most unique things I can actually bring to the table as a content creator. The premise of the show has actually been slightly altered due to a conversation I had with a friend, and that actually sparked the idea for today's video, but we'll get to that later. Pretty much, the show will now feature teams that can be the full offense or defense, and that can also include their coaches, and it will also I can also do individual superstars. Now that I've addressed that, last week I actually covered what Patrick Mahomes is in line for after signing his massive record-breaking deal. And if you haven't checked that video out, the link will be in the description box down below. So after this video ends, please go give that a watch. Thank you very much. Now, earlier I did mention that conversation with a friend and how it sparked the idea for today's video. That conversation actually was about Mahomes' contract and how it was structured and how they can keep offensive weapons around him. Now, this is an extremely important aspect for NFL offenses, and this is where the business side of the league actually comes into play. Teams must have the financial means to retain these players as well as be able to contend for a championship. Most teams actually have one really good player at each position, with a decent supplemental player or semi-unproven player on rookie deal as a second option. Now, strangely, there's one team that came to mind when I thought about teams that defy that. So let's take a look at a club that actually has a decent quarterback with an insane amount of talent around him, or the Cleveland Browns. The Browns have two top-tier players in three of the most crucial offensive positions on the field. And by top tier, I do mean players that can actually start for another team or be another team's top option for their quarterback or top option in the running game. The Browns actually have two top-tier receivers in Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry. They have two top-tier tight ends in Austin Hooper and David Njoku. And they also have two top-tier running backs in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. To me, all these players can actually be the star for another team in their particular position. So in my opinion, this is the best offense that this version of the Browns has ever assembled. Now, for clarification, even though all the history and franchise information are still in the organization's name, the original Browns team left Cleveland during the 1995 season and became the Baltimore Ravens. The city actually fought the NFL to stay the owners of all the franchise history, and thus the Ravens were technically regarded as an expansion team that began play in 1996. The Browns team was actually deactivated until 1999 when they were purchased for $530 million. Now, for them to actually compete with the other teams, or let's put that in air quotes, compete, they recruited players from a method called the expansion draft, where every single team in the league would protect all their top tier talent because that's just what they wanted to do, protect their best players. So every other team in the league protected their top tier talent, and the Browns had to choose scraps. And they got their choice of 150 players that were left unprotected through this draft. So due to this, the Browns were actually the joke of the league for years, until about 2017, where some pieces actually kind of started to fall into place. But even though today's episode is covering the offense and the capabilities that they have, a defensive pick in the 2017 draft is kind of what became one of the major turning points for the Browns organization in general. That would be their number one pick in that year's draft, Myles Garrett, who turned into a defensive leader and then eventually an all-around team captain, and he gave the team a sense of morale that it had yet to experience since the team's reactivation in 1999. Now, a few other transactions following this would actually give the Browns some ground to walk on and eventually allow them to find the path to some team success. And in chronological order, those transactions are as follows. They actually drafted the tight end David Njoku in that year's draft, but as of right now, he has requested a trade, so he might not be on the team come the start of the season. And prior to the 2018 season, they actually traded for Jarvis Landry, who was a top-tier receiver for the Miami Dolphins, and they actually got him under contract until 2023. The Browns would actually draft Baker Mayfield in 2018 with the number one pick, and he is under contract till 2022, pending his fifth-year option. Then, in the next round of that year's draft, they actually drafted the running back Nick Chubb, and he is under contract till 2021 because as a second-round pick, he doesn't have to stay with that team for 4 years. His contract was only 3 years, and there is no team option with that. So, unless he is extended, then he'll hit free agency at the end of next season. They actually signed the running back Kareem Hunt following his release from the Chiefs in 2019. For those of you who don't know, Kareem Hunt actually had a domestic violence dispute, and the Chiefs didn't tolerate it because I believe he didn't tell them about it or something. And so pretty much they ended up releasing him, and the Browns picked him up off of those waivers. And he is under contract until the end of this season, unless he is franchise tagged or extended, which I find the franchise tag to be unlikely. Following that, they actually traded for the wide receiver Odell Beckham in a blockbuster trade that would bring him to the Browns away from New York City. He's actually under contract until 2024, where he'll hit free agency unrestricted and be allowed to sign with any team of his choosing. And this offseason in free agency, the Browns would acquire tight end Austin Hooper, and he is under contract until 2024. That is pretty much how we got to this point prior to the 2020 season, and now it's time to explore what the future holds for the Cleveland-based organization. Well, with all of that out of the way, welcome to Up Next. Roll it. Episode 2, the Cleveland Browns. Now, I actually don't want to waste any time, and I want to get straight into the first prediction. I actually believe the Browns will go 10-6 and make the playoffs this season. Now, as said earlier, the Browns have a ton of offensive options and a solid defense headed up by Myles Garrett. There's no reason they shouldn't be able to take 5 wins from their 6 interdivision games. From there, I feel like they should be able to dismantle just 5 more teams, and that could allow for that playoff berth. And tasting playoff football might be the major boost the team needs to make those deep playoff runs with its young core. The biggest threat in their division is going to be the Baltimore Ravens, but I feel the team can actually rally together and take down the defending division champs just once throughout the season, out of 2 games. From there, I see the possibility of them delivering some L's to about 5 other teams outside their division. Respectively, those teams are the newly minted Washington football team, the Las Vegas Raiders, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the New York Giants, and the New York Jets. However, if some of those teams do pull off an upset, I don't see why the Browns can't bounce back by pulling off a few of the upsets on other teams that are the favorites in other games. Number 2, Baker Mayfield's fate will be determined this season. Now, throughout his first 2 seasons, Mayfield has been an exceptional quarterback, to say the least. He hasn't been the worst, he hasn't been the best, but most importantly, he just hasn't been what the Browns have needed under center. And this is opposed to this happening in the final year of his deal, which is next season, and that would leave his 5th year option unlikely to be picked up for the 2022 season. And the reason I say this could be his final season in Cleveland as the starter is because they actually possess a lot of offensive talent right now, and they shouldn't waste any time putting it to use, especially while those players are young. And to do that, the Browns need a typical game manager plus. By that I do mean they need a quarterback that can come in, make the right plays, the right reads, take the extra step when they need it, and Mayfield just hasn't done that consistently enough. However, it's possible that experience has given him what he's needed to take off to the next level and therefore elevate the team to a playoff contention, up from an abysmal 6-10 record in 2019. Now, as of the end of the 2020 calendar year, there's a highly touted quarterback prospect by the name of Trevor Lawrence, who is officially eligible for the NFL draft, and while he will declare or not is unknown at the time of this recording. It's a good time for the Browns to actually start looking elsewhere if their number 1 selection from 2018 doesn't show them that he deserves to have their franchise in his hands. With all the assets they have, it's not unlikely the Browns could be able to get their hands on a pick high enough to select a draft candidate, because they have all of these solid players in second positions. They can easily trade for probably one of the top 3 picks in their draft, depending on who has those picks. They might not even need one of those. They might be able to select Lawrence with like the 6th pick. Number 3, the Browns will actually extend the running back Nick Chubb. Now, with Chubb exploding for nearly 1,000 yards and only starting 9 games in 2018, the Browns actually decided to promote him to a full-time starter for the 2019 season. He finished with nearly 1,500 rushing yards and just under 300 yards receiving. And as a power back with decent hands for the pass game, he possesses a unique set of utility combined with amazing durability, as he has not missed a single game throughout his career. Now, backs like Chubb are highly coveted throughout the league, and they're extremely rare as well. And with him being only a 2nd round choice, he could be a free agency by the end of next season, as stated earlier. And depending on his performance in 2020, Chubb will have a selection of top dollar contracts from most teams in the league. But there is something else I do want to mention, and I do need you guys to take this with a minimal grain of salt, because as of July 13th, 2020, the Browns organization actually had the most cap space available in the league with an estimated figure of $38.6 million. Now, with no transactions recorded between then and the time of this recording, that figure remains roughly the same. Keyword, roughly. So with that established, the Browns and Chubb could begin talks and reach an agreement before the end of the regular season. I actually suspect that he'll be offered a contract that'll last until his age 30 season. That's because that's when the prime of most running backs is kind of over, just about age 30 or 31. That's kind of when these running backs are out of their prime. And if I had to guess, I say he would get a contract around $63 million for the 6 years. And I find that to be a fair deal as he sits behind Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey stat-wise. And to me, based off of Derrick Henry's deal, that is top 3 running back money. To state the obvious, the Browns should lock up a more than solid back while they can. They don't have room for error when they have all these great pieces everywhere else. They need to lock down this position while they can. Number 4. The Browns will actually reach the Super Bowl in the next 5 seasons. Now listen, after last week's topic, I know this seems like a long shot, but hear me out. Like, just hear me out. The best can be bested. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm glad you asked. There's no one that can actually become the best without making a few mistakes. And I feel like the Browns team will be put together well enough to make a deep playoff run, and this will get them dealing with the AFC's new powerhouse at some point in the postseason, aka Kansas City. Now, this won't happen often, but I feel like the Browns might be able to play just enough of a decent offensive game to beat the Chiefs' arguably subpar defense, and I feel like they'll have enough defensive playmakers to actually stay in the game and keep number 15 contained. And if they can do that, they can win at least once. But they aren't going to get them twice. That's just not going to happen. It's Patrick Mahomes, for goodness sake. Like, I'm being as close to realistic as possible here. And don't go where I even would go. Like, I know these are predictions, but let's just have a teaspoon of reality here. Mahomes won't allow that. From there, I actually almost forgot to mention the Browns do have a new head coach who has run a solid offense in Minnesota I almost forgot to mention that the Browns have a new head coach who has run a solid offense for Minnesota prior to signing with them. He was actually the offensive coordinator for the Vikings. Now, he might bring a few new things to give the Browns that extra jolt they need to get that much closer to achieving those playoff victories or even the Super Bowl, and even just getting there in general. And if they do get there, the next thing that really gets me is, could they really win? I don't see it being impossible, but it does seem extremely unlikely, especially when you consider the fact that they might only get there one time. Most teams got to go there more than once to win. And pretty much those teams save a few good plays, like special plays with high success rates for those big moments. And true enough, like, anything can happen. But, like, in my 100% honest opinion, I feel like the Browns are going to have to look to those special plays before that big game. And I feel like the opposing NFC matchup just might have all that scouted. They might just be ready to stop any of those big shot plays that most teams decide to lean on. But even with all of that being said, I get the sense it will be a tragic story like the Titans loss in the Super Bowl. I feel like they would come just as close as 1 yard from shining on the biggest stage of football. Like, completely. And if not just a yard, to make it a little bit worse, it could be even a few inches. The tip of the ball could be right on the edge of the goal line, and it just wouldn't cross it. I feel like it would be that dramatic of an ending for the Cleveland Browns. That's all I actually have for today. And I typically would have done a 5th prediction, but I had way more content for each of the 4 that I presented. And to be honest, the 5th one didn't really have that much to it, so I really combined it with number 4. And honestly, I feel like it worked a lot better, but in the future, if you guys want, I'll be working to try to make there be 5 predictions, and I'll make sure they each have a lot of content behind them. With that being said, this has been another episode of Up Next, and I hope you all enjoyed So if you did, leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I would like to see you all next time. So have a good one.